My parents ruined my credit as a cosigner, so I got them evicted. The eviction notice in my trembling hands felt heavier than it should have. 24 hours. That's all my parents had left in a house I'd been helping them afford for the past 3 years. The same house where my credit score had gone to die, where my financial future had been sacrificed on the altar of their irresponsibility, and where I was about to deliver the final blow that would change our family forever. But let me back up, because this story doesn't start with revenge. It starts with love, misplaced trust, and a 22-year-old kid who thought helping family was always the right thing to do. My name is Jake, and 3 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my young adult life. I co-signed a lease. I was fresh out of college with a degree in computer science, landing my first real job at a tech startup in Austin making $65,000 a year. Not bad for a small-town kid from Millerville, Texas, population 8,000. My parents, Carol and Dennis Mitchell, were struggling. Dad had been laid off from the plant where he'd worked for 15 years, and Mom's part-time job at the local grocery store wasn't cutting it. They were facing foreclosure on our childhood home, and I couldn't bear the thought of them losing everything. Jake, honey, Mom had said over the phone, her voice thick with tears, we found this perfect little rental house. It's only $1,200 a month, and it's in a nice neighborhood. The problem is, well, with your father's layoff and my limited income, they're asking for a cosigner with good credit. I should have said no. I should have hung up the phone, driven the 3 hours home, and helped them figure out a different solution. Instead, I said the 4 words that would haunt me for years, I'll help you out. The house was actually nice. A 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom ranch-style home on Maple Street, with a decent yard and a 2-car garage. The landlord, Mrs. Henderson, was a sweet woman in her 70s who seemed genuinely concerned about finding good tenants. She explained the terms clearly, $1,200 monthly rent, first month and security deposit up front, and as cosigner, I would be equally responsible for all financial obligations. Your parents seem lovely, Mrs. Henderson told me as we signed the papers. But you understand, Jake, that if they can't pay for any reason, this becomes your responsibility entirely? I nodded confidently. I understand. But they're good people. They'll pay. God, I was naive. For the first 6 months, everything went smoothly. Mom would text me photos of the little garden she'd planted in the backyard. Dad had found part-time work at a hardware store and seemed optimistic about his job prospects. The rent was paid on time, and I felt good about helping my family get back on their feet. Then came month 7. Jake, we're going to be a little short this month, Dad called to tell me. Just got hit with some unexpected car repairs. Could you cover us? We'll pay you back next month, plus we'll be caught up by then. The amount was $400. Not nothing, but manageable on my salary. I sent them the money through Venmo with a simple message, love you guys. Pay me back when you can. Month 8, Jake, your mother had to go to the emergency room. Nothing serious, but the copay and prescriptions wiped us out. Could you help with rent again? This time it was $600. I was starting to feel the pinch, but family is family, right? Month 9, they needed the full $1,200. Month 10, full rent plus they were behind on utilities. Month 11, they sheepishly admitted they'd racked up a $300 late fee that I needed to cover on top of rent. By the end of the first year, I had personally paid over $8,000 in rent and associated costs for my parents' housing. They'd paid me back exactly $0. Every time I brought it up, there was a new crisis, a new excuse, a new emergency that prevented them from reimbursing me. We're going through a rough patch, son, Dad would say. Things will turn around soon. But things didn't turn around. If anything, they got worse. Year 2 was when I started to get suspicious. I'd driven home for Christmas and noticed some things that didn't add up. Dad had a new fishing boat in the driveway, nothing fancy, but definitely not free. Mom was wearing jewelry I hadn't seen before. The house was full of new furniture and a 65-inch smart TV that definitely wasn't there during my last visit. Where did all this stuff come from? I asked. Oh, we got some great deals, Mom said vaguely. You know how good I am at finding bargains. I let it slide, but something felt off. If they were so broke that I was paying their rent every month, how were they affording all these extras? The real wake-up call came in month 18 when I decided to check my credit score as part of my annual financial review. I'd been monitoring it regularly since college, watching it climb steadily from the mid-600s to a respectable 780. I was proud of that score and the financial discipline it represented. When I logged into Credit Karma, my heart stopped. Credit score, 620. I stared at the screen, certain there had to be a mistake. I clicked through to see what had caused such a dramatic drop, and there it was in black and white, multiple late payments associated with 847 Maple Street. The address of my parents' rental house. My hands were shaking as I called the property management company that had taken over Mrs. Henderson's properties when she retired. Hi, this is Jake Mitchell. I'm the cosigner on the property at 847 Maple Street. I need to know about the payment history on this account. The property manager, a man named Kevin Rodriguez, pulled up the file. What he told me made my blood run cold. Well, Mr. Mitchell, I have to say, this has been one of our most problematic accounts. In the past 6 months alone, rent has been late 4 times, including one payment that was 45 days overdue. We've had to send multiple notices, and frankly, we've been considering eviction proceedings. But I've been making payments, I protested. I see some payments from you, yes, but they've been sporadic and often partial. And there have been months where no payment was received at all until we sent late notices. My mind was reeling. I'd been sending my parents money every single month. Where was it going if not to rent? That night, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into my parents' rental account using the information I had from the original lease agreement. What I found there was worse than I'd imagined. Month after month of late payments. Partial payments. Missed payments entirely. In several cases, I could see that I had sent my parents money on the 1st of the month, but the rent wasn't paid until the 20th or later, after late fees had already been assessed. Sometimes, the amount paid was less than what I had sent them. They were using the money I gave them for other things and only paying rent when threatened with eviction. I felt sick. These were my parents. The people who had raised me, taught me right from wrong, instilled in me the values of honesty and hard work. And they were stealing from me. But it gets worse. The next morning, I called my parents and confronted them directly. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. When I send you money for rent, are you using it to pay rent? There was a long pause. Of course, honey. Why would you ask that? Because I checked my credit score, and it's been destroyed by late payments on your house. I also spoke with the property management company, and they told me rent is consistently late. Another pause, longer this time. Well, sometimes we have to prioritize other bills. Other bills? Mom, I've been sending you money specifically for rent. Money that I can't really afford to be giving you every month. If you're not using it for rent, what are you using it for? That's when Dad got on the phone. Now listen here, Jake. We're adults, and we know how to manage our finances. Sometimes rent can wait a few weeks while we take care of more pressing matters. More pressing than keeping a roof over your heads. You don't understand the pressure we're under. We've got medical bills, car payments, your mother needed some new clothes for work. So you've been lying to me for over a year. We haven't been lying, Mom chimed in. We never said we were paying rent on the exact day you sent money. The gaslighting was incredible. They were trying to make me feel like I was being unreasonable for expecting them to use money designated for rent to actually pay rent. That conversation ended badly, with a lot of shouting and hurt feelings. But it opened my eyes to what had really been happening. My parents weren't victims of circumstance struggling to make ends meet. They were financially irresponsible people who had found a way to live beyond their means by using my credit and my money as a safety net. I decided to conduct an experiment. I told them I was having my own financial difficulties and wouldn't be able to help with rent for the next month. You need to figure out how to pay the $1,200 on your own, I told them. I've helped for over a year, and I need a break. The reaction was immediate and explosive. How can you abandon us like this? Mom cried. We're your parents. If we get evicted, it'll ruin your credit too, Dad threatened. That threat was the final straw. They weren't concerned about being homeless. They were using my financial stake in their housing to manipulate me into continuing to subsidize their lifestyle. But here's the thing, I didn't cut them off entirely. I wanted to see what would happen. Would they somehow come up with the money? Would they make sacrifices to cover their basic living expenses? The answer was no. Rent was due on April 1st, April 15th came and went with no payment. On April 20th, I got a call from Kevin Rodriguez. Mr. Mitchell, we haven't received rent for 847 Maple Street. This is now the second month in a row where rent has been significantly late. As cosigner, you're receiving formal notice that payment must be made within 72 hours or we'll begin eviction proceedings. I called my parents immediately. The rent is 3 weeks late. What's going on? We told you we needed help this month, Mom said. We can't pay it without you. What have you been doing for money? You both work. Our income barely covers our other expenses. What other expenses? You have a car payment, insurance, utilities, groceries, and rent. What else? That's when the truth finally came out. Dad had been spending money on his hobby, restoring classic cars. Not expensive cars, but the parts and tools added up. Mom had been sending money to my cousin Lisa, whose husband had left her with 3 kids. They'd also been paying for a storage unit full of stuff from our old house, a gym membership, subscription services for streaming, and eating out regularly because Mom didn't feel like cooking after working all day. None of these were necessities. None of these were more important than keeping a roof over their heads. But they prioritized all of it over rent because they knew I would eventually cave and cover the shortfall. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice eerily calm. You've been using me as your personal bank account for over a year, destroying my credit in the process, so you could spend your money on hobbies and takeout. It's not like that, Jake. Then what is it like? Silence. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to enable them anymore. But I also wasn't going to let them destroy my credit further. If they wanted to be financially irresponsible, they could face the consequences. But I was going to protect myself. I called Kevin Rodriguez back. Kevin, this is Jake Mitchell again. I want to understand my options as cosigner on 847 Maple Street. Well, as cosigner, you're equally responsible for all debts associated with the property. You could pay the outstanding balance and take over the lease entirely, or you could face eviction proceedings along with the primary tenants. What if I wanted to evict the current tenants myself? There was a pause. That's complicated. You need to speak with our legal department. As cosigner, you have certain rights, but evicting the primary tenants while you're not living there is unusual. Can you transfer me to legal? The conversation with the legal department was eye-opening. As cosigner, I had signed a contract that made me equally responsible for the property. But that responsibility came with rights. Under Texas law, if I was willing to assume full financial responsibility for the property, I could petition to have the primary tenants removed for breach of contract, specifically, for violating the lease terms by consistently paying rent late. It would require going to court, providing documentation of the payment history, and proving that their behavior was damaging my credit and financial standing. But it was possible. I spent the next week gathering evidence. Bank statements showing every payment I'd made on my parents' behalf. Screenshots of my credit report showing the decline. Communication records with the property management company. Late notices and fee assessments. Then I did something that felt absolutely terrible. I hired a lawyer. Janet Morrison was a tenant rights attorney who also handled landlord-tenant disputes from the other side. When I explained my situation, she was fascinated. I've never seen a case quite like this, she admitted. Usually, when a cosigner wants to remove tenants, it's because they want to move in themselves. You're essentially asking to evict your own parents to protect your credit. Is it legal? It's legally complex, but yes. You have a financial interest in this property that's being damaged by their behavior. The question is, are you sure you want to do this? This will likely destroy your relationship with your parents permanently. I thought about that for a long time. Was I sure? My parents had lied to me for over a year. They'd stolen thousands of dollars from me by using money I gave them for rent for their personal expenses. They'd damaged my credit, which would affect my ability to buy a house, get a car loan, or even rent an apartment for years to come. They'd manipulated and guilt-tripped me when I tried to set boundaries. And when confronted with the truth, they'd shown no remorse, no accountability, and no willingness to change. I'm sure, I told Janet. The legal process took 2 months. During that time, my parents continued to not pay rent. I stopped sending them money entirely, which meant they racked up more late fees and pushed my credit score even lower. But every missed payment was more evidence for our case. In June, we went to court. My parents showed up with their own lawyer, somehow they'd found money for that, and tried to argue that I was being vindictive and cruel. Their attorney painted a picture of a heartless son abandoning his struggling parents in their time of need. But Janet was prepared. She presented bank records showing that I paid over $18,000 toward my parents' housing costs in less than 2 years. She showed the court my credit report and the damage caused by their late payments. She had documentation from the property management company detailing every late payment, every fee, every notice. Most damning of all, she had evidence of their discretionary spending during the time I was covering their rent. The boat purchase. The jewelry. The car parts. The restaurant bills. Money going to extended family while they claimed they couldn't afford basic housing. Your Honor, Janet argued, Mr. Jake Mitchell entered into this cosigner agreement in good faith to help his parents during a difficult time. Instead, they have used his financial backing to subsidize a lifestyle they cannot afford, causing significant damage to his credit and financial well-being. They have violated the lease agreement through consistent late payments and have shown no intention of changing their behavior. The judge listened to both sides, reviewed the evidence, and made his ruling. This is an unusual case, but the facts are clear. The primary tenants have consistently violated the lease agreement, and their actions have caused financial harm to the cosigner. Mr. Jake Mitchell's request to remove the primary tenants and assume full responsibility for the lease is granted. Dennis and Carol Mitchell have 30 days to vacate the property. 30 days. The ride home from the courthouse was the most uncomfortable 2 hours of my life. My parents drove separately, but I could see Mom crying in their car ahead of me. Part of me wanted to call the whole thing off, to tell them I'd help them find another place, to pretend this had all been a big misunderstanding. But then I thought about my credit score. About the $18,000 I'd never see again. About the lies and manipulation and complete lack of accountability. About how they'd threatened to let me get evicted too when I tried to set boundaries. They'd made their choice long before I made mine. The 30 days were brutal. My parents tried everything, guilt, anger, bargaining, more guilt. Other family members got involved, calling me to tell me I was being